said, let's dive right in. Jonquel Jones is off to Barclays and the New York Liberty. A little overview on what Jonquel Jones has done up to this point. She is the 2021 MVP, the Suns' all-time leader in blocks, a 4-time All-Star, and she's averaged a double-double twice in her career in 2017 and 2021. So the New York Liberty are getting a huge, huge piece, and something that I think they struggled with a little bit last year is, rebounding, defense, and they're getting probably the best defensive player in the WNBA. So to recap with the trade, it was a 3-team trade. The Liberty received Jonquel Jones from the Sun, Kayla Thornton from the Wings, Dallas. The Wings received Natasha Howard from the Liberty and the rights to Crystal Dangerfield from the Liberty as well. And then the Suns received the 6th overall pick from the Liberty, Beck Allen from the Liberty, and Ty Harris from the Wings. Miles, I'll start with you. When you see this trade hit Twitter, what are your first reactions?
Well, it's just excitement initially, right? Because the New York Liberty were in this limbo era, right, where they were recognizing their big three as Sabrina as a franchise point guard, which she is, Benijah Laney as the second offensive player, and then Natasha Howard as the wrapping up the big three. And I think it's kind of known in W, you need a big three to compete for a championship. When you have a league that's only 12 teams, the talent is so condensed that you need at least 3 genuine franchise players, superstars. And it got to the point with this chapter of Liberty basketball, it became obvious to the front office that this 3-headed monster of Laney, Howard, and Sabrina is not going to cut it when you have teams like the Aces, teams like the old Connecticut Sun, who will probably rebuild in a few years and have a similar dynasty. But, it's obvious that they were recognizing that chapter of New York Liberty basketball needed to end, and now they're starting a new 3-headed monster with obviously Sab at the franchise point guard spot, and now Jonquel Jones, a genuine franchise player, former MVP a year in and year out. If she stays healthy, she's going to be an MVP candidate. She's only 29 years old. Also, I feel like they got a bit of a steal because she's still in her prime. That's really, she's a player who could play to near 38 years old. I'd assume. I'd hope so if she wants to play. So yeah, they'll be happy to have her around forever. So I think it's obvious. The Liberty won this deal. The Connecticut Sun were in a tough spot because Jonquel Jones met with various clubs and said New York is where I want to be. In Connecticut, when you respect the stardom of Jonquel Jones, you send her to New York, and you're unlikely to get the value back because you're in a tough spot. The New York Liberty are also where she wants to come. So,
right,
a great start for the New York Liberty's offseason.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think viewing this as someone who isn't as well versed in the Liberty as Miles, I think it's very impressive to me that they were able to get Jones, who is this franchise player, as you mentioned, Miles, and it's also giving them a bunch of cap space. So it's just an incredibly smart trade, and as you mentioned, Miles, there's no way you can deny that they're the winners of this trade. It makes me very excited for the Liberty season, and Jones is just such an impressive player. She's a great shooter, efficient on defense. On both sides of the ball, she really is going to affect this Liberty team in a great way. And, as we'll get into later, you can have this big three with Breanna Stewart possibly, which, they could be on the way to a super team. So, I just think that the Liberty, this is a very smart trade and very impressive, honestly.
I personally, and I hope this isn't an overreaction, but I really think for the Liberty, this is one of the best trades in WNBA history because there's quite a few reasons for that. One, of course, you get Jonquel Jones, and the situation really benefited the Liberty. The Liberty fully knew Jonquel Jones only wanted to go to New York, so they're obviously going to take advantage of that fact, and the Sun were going to always respect that. Good for the Sun. However, their rebuild doesn't look great as a result of it. I mean, the number 6 overall pick in next year's draft, I would say this would be a much better pick. In this year's draft, I think after the top 3 or 4, you see a drop off. In next year's draft, it's like the Caitlin Clark Paige Becker's draft. So the Sun didn't really get the value back or even a little bit. But when I first saw this trade, I was like, no way. This is a highway robbery. But then I looked a little more and it became a little more understandable for the Sun to get at least some talent back. I mean, Beck Allen is great. I mean, she was very efficient for the Liberty. absolutely heartbroken to see her go, considering we got Jonquel Jones? No. And the same thing with Natasha Howard. I mean, she was with Benijah Laney gone, she was at 2-piece for Sabrina Ionescu. So that's obviously a big loss. But I think Jonquel Jones is kind of like a better version of Natasha Howard. So I think you see just a straight up upgrade in every single category of this trade. So, I mean, the Liberty are genuinely really, really in a good position now.
And I'm glad you touched on who the Liberty lost, because that is important, right? Beck Allen and Natasha Howard were two of their most important faces for the last 7 years, it seems. And obviously, you know, Beck Allen's been around for what it feels like forever. She's been a face of this franchise. I feel like a lot of the Liberty community was emotionally attached to her for good reason. She was a really kind person. And it's going to be difficult to see Beck Allen move on and face Natasha Howard on the road. That'll be interesting to see. And I'm really excited for Natasha Howard's future in Dallas. I think that her and Enrique, they've played together overseas before. They have a relationship with USA Basketball as well. And, you know, that's a really fun duo. Everyone knows how explosive Enrique Akumbawale is. And then to add kind of a seasoned vet in Natasha Howard, that'll be a fun pairing in Dallas. But on the Liberty's end, one of the things that everyone's glossing over is Kayla Thornton joining this ball club.
Absolutely.
Because she's, you know, kind of an unsung hero for the Dallas Wings. You know, she's super fun. She adds a lot of that attitude that Dallas carried with them last year. I feel like she was a locker room player. She was kind of that spark plug. And, you know, in New York, she's going to fit right in with Dee Richards and this culture. It's going to be fun. And, you know, I think Kayla Thornton is a player that we'll talk about later in the Liberty season and say, hey, wow, like that was really an undervalued part of this trade that we got a solid role player in Kayla Thornton.
And the thing is with Kayla Thornton is she's likely to go off for 15 any given night, which is an incredible piece to have. Something I want to see from her as she transitions to the Liberty is maybe becoming a little more consistent, because while she's likely to go off for 15 every night, she's also likely to score 2 points. So I think I would be okay. Miss, right? Yeah, I would be okay even like meeting in the middle, like 8 or 9 points per game, even like 6 or 7 points per game.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to see consistency. I mean, it's hard for a player like that when, especially, you know, the New York Liberty are setting themselves up for playoff games. So in a playoff game, if you need her to perform, it's like, will she, won't she? I would much rather know what I'm getting. But I think the biggest thing, another thing people are glossing over here, is the fact that through this trade, the Liberty acquired an MVP and Kayla Thornton, and somehow through this trade shed salary cap.
Exactly right. No,
and that's something that amazes me. Like, you get arguably a top 3 player in the WNBA, and you shed salary cap. And with that, you can get what I think is the best overall player in the WNBA. We're going to transition here to talking about Breanna Stewart, who I will say my second favorite player in the WNBA. Number 1 is Courtney Vandersloot, which ironically enough is also connected to the New York Liberty here. But we're going to talk about Breanna Stewart. She is a powerhouse, and she will make any team a contender by herself. So the fact she could be joining a team that already has Sabrina Ionescu, Jonquel Jones, so many other, I mean, Steph Dolson, Hanju probably, if she comes back.
Yeah.
I mean,
she will.
She will. Yeah. There's absolutely,
at some point in the year, it depends how late,
yeah.
But I'm sure she'll be back.
Yeah. So guys, let's say Breanna Stewart. It's a big, huge question mark. Like, and Breanna Stewart has been fanning the fire a little bit with her
no
tweets.
Doubt about that.
With her tweets, I didn't spend as much time as I saw other people on Twitter did trying to figure out those emojis, but I did spend like maybe 3 minutes being like, what could this mean? But then I looked at the replies. I'm like, people are thinking too deep into this. I will not be giving it my time. But if Breanna Stewart does come to the Liberty, is this team now a championship or bust team?
I mean, I think so. I think if they really complete the big 3 in that manner, it is a championship or bust year with that kind of star power. And I think this offseason could potentially turn into the Jonathan Kolb show. Jonathan Kolb being the general manager of the New York Liberty. He's known for his ability to manage his salary cap. He really got the job because of that. He comes from the league front office, and that was really what his claim to fame was when he got hired as the youngest general manager at the time. And I listened to him on a good friend of mine, Mark Schindler's podcast recently, and he was just talking about how his time working as a young guy in Phoenix, and then moving over to the league office and getting his law degree and then moving over to the Liberty. It's like, this is his time to shine, it seems now. This offseason where he sheds cap space, creates cap space, my apologies, with Jonquel coming over, and now it's the opportunity to sign potentially 2 All-Stars, if not just one. Breanna, Stewart, and then obviously Courtney Vandersloot. It's like, if he completes that, it'll be this historic offseason, which I think he's kind of supposed to be this young gun that could have that potential. And, it's exciting for the Liberty to say this decision to hire a particularly young GM could really pay off in a big way. Obviously, it's still is a lot to be told, but there's the potential for an exciting team. I think what it really stands at a 50-50 shot whether they'll land those All-Stars.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with Miles. I think that pending they do acquire these All-Stars, if you have a super team like this, you gotta set your expectations high, and for me, that would be a championship. And correct me if I'm wrong, I saw that Jones and Stewart played together in Europe, so I think that's great. There's already some team chemistry there. So I think if they can get those pieces, that's just going to be a really fun team to watch and very successful.
They played on a team that was so stacked. Jonquel Jones was coming off the bench. That I read about that, and that is insane. Like, oh man, it's also a whole other conversation about how they have to go overseas to get money, but that's for another day. But another huge thing about the Breanna Stewart thing is they also, I mean, the Liberty are just rich with assets. They still have another first round tradable pick that they can do a sign and trade with, and they can afford a supermax. I mean, they have Sabrina Ionescu, Jonquel Jones, Benai Jelani, and they can still sign a supermax. That's just mind-boggling to me. And as someone who has reported on the Liberty, enjoys watching them, this is amazing for me. I love watching it, and to even say we could afford Courtney Vandersloot on top of that, this is likely to be one of the first kind of acquired super teams we've seen in WNBA. A lot of the aces was kind of homegrown, which is amazing to see, and they are a super team in their own right. But this is the first time I think we're seeing a super team growing in one offseason. And
I think for the Liberty, the trades really might not be done yet, because if they're going to go after that Vandersloot-Stewie combo, I think we could see Laney getting shipped, and then we could see even Steph Dolson possibly getting shipped, because that's a big contract. And, when you think about that JJ Sab, Stewie Vandersloot, I don't know the role that Steph Dolson really plays in that.
100%.
So you could really free up some space getting rid of her. So I think the moves are just beginning to get underway.
Absolutely. And another thing is when you have those 4 players already on your starting lineup, you don't have to pay a lot for that 5th spot, I don't think. To have Steph Dolson under so much money on her contract, I think you can free that up, sign a younger player, take your chances, because worst case scenario, you have 4 All-Stars out there and someone who's struggling, and
not even to mention the plethora of young stars, the Johannes Chu.
She's incredible.
The role players are kind of already there. It's about now adding the big names, and if Stephanie Dolson is not one of the big names you see, maybe it's time to move on.
And on that current roster that they had last year, they even, they almost got to the second round. So there's already a huge, a great base there. And the fact they were able to build on that the way they have, and potentially even more, is, hats off to the GM, like you said. I mean, he's doing an absolutely incredible job. I don't know what he could have done to do a better job at this point.
And it's funny because they've had some, average years, and there's been some question marks saying, I know this is a good ball club, this is a talented team, but this is not a championship team. That was obvious. And every press conference you went to was no one considered them a championship ball club, even themselves. And that was kind of frustrating for a couple of years. And now you look back and you're thinking, well, I guess maybe this was all worth it. The kind of, we'll take the 8 seed, we're not really in it. And now this could be the start of a new era.
Yeah, and to be able to recognize that, because there's a lot of teams across all sports that will see potential in a team, but stick with that potential for too long, and then you're 5 years down the road and you're we're still fighting for an 8 seed and a 7 seed, and we haven't really gotten better. So the fact that he has gone out of his way to be like, all right, I don't want to get stuck in this trap of like, we'll get better next year. We'll get better next year. We'll get better next year. And then 6 years down the line and you're still in the same space, I think is incredible that they're obviously going out of their way. And there's, I mean, anything can happen. I mean, you look at like the Nets, who didn't do very well last season. And
it's true.
But I truly don't see a way that this Liberty team doesn't compete for at least a 2 or a 3 seed. Like,
as it stands today, I would say there's still a lot up in the air.
Yeah.
That they could still be that 5-6 seed team if they don't land anybody else. But I think it's likely they make at least one more trade and sign at least one big name. I think
and
that's
it's still an upgrade.
safe to say. Yeah, absolutely.
If they do nothing else, it's still an upgrade. They have Jonquel Jones, but